Hi, and welcome to Here to Talk. And we also call ourselves, of course, the one-stop shop for getting unstuck. And I think most of us at some stage in our life have been stuck. We may have been able to get better from that, but we may not. And therefore, I think this talk today is going to be very helpful. Um, in fact, I'm going to welcome a really interesting man whose job is to actually deal with people very much who are stuck. He's a practicing counselling psychologist and works in higher education as a research supervisor and educator. And he also has a very big interest in the role of physical activity in the management of mental illness. So we will certainly come to that. Willem, you are incredibly welcome. Thank you for making time for us. Um, can I just get you to talk about I think we need to get to the heart of stuckness because it's a word I've used, and I think most of us know what it means. But in psychological terms, through your lens as a psychologist, what does it mean to you?
Well, yeah, thanks. It's wonderful to be here, Chrissy. Thanks for having me on the podcast and yeah, to talk about some interesting topics. I think you alluded to an interesting point is that we use language in different ways, and this word of being stuck, I think, means different things to different people. But I think in general, people use the term um, when they've become despondent or maybe frustrated with not being able to get somewhere or to get out of their current situation, or they feel defeated, or they don't have any motivation, or they don't have any purpose. And these things can manifest in different ways, in anxiety, depression, um, and so people that are stuck might find themselves uh, having different symptoms that in psychological terms we would categorize together and then look at it from that way.
Right, because many of our viewers I think I will hasten to add, many of us have been there, but many of our viewers will, at this moment in time, be stuck on a sofa and they'll have been there a good part of the day and they're probably looking at Netflix, but hopefully they're listening to us. So I think we'd all like to know what's happening in their brain and emotions listening to this. So they might just have a sort of half a light bulb moment when they think, yeah, something wrong here. But what's going on for them in sort of in the brain?
Again, I think always important to note that when we talk about things, we talk in general sense, and that it's by no means necessarily the case for everybody. But when I think about this person you've described, who's sitting on the couch and watching Netflix, I wonder, I wonder about this person's view of themselves. I wonder about what it is they want to achieve. I wonder what it is that they've learned about being a citizen of the world. I also wonder about what's available to them. What context are they in? What socioeconomic context are they in? What kind of social support do they have? And all of these things can contribute to really just rather choosing to sit on that couch than to do something else.
So maybe we should just look at a few triggers because I think it's fair to say that certain things in our life events, probably can, for some people, lead to stuckness, such as a marriage breakdown, a job loss, maybe a chronic illness. I'm wondering what can be done or which ones hit hardest from your point of view. They're not all, you can't just get rid of them. They've come and now they're desperate to do something about it, but they haven't got a clue how to do it.
Mm. Again, I think important to keep in mind these kind of individual differences, and keeping that in mind will help us have a great deal more empathy with people. And so, for example, let's say I lose my cell phone. to me, that might not be the end of the world. I might be distressed about it for a couple of minutes, think about where I left it, and then go on to think, well, okay, it's just a cell phone. I probably misplaced it. I'll find it later, or I can find my phone to find it, or I'm sure someone will find it, or it's insured, and I'll be able to regulate my response to this event. And for other people, losing the cell phone would be very, very traumatic. And so I guess what I'm alluding to is that we all make different meaning from these events that happen to us. Um, and so what might cause one person to be stuck might not cause someone else to be stuck.
So without naming, obviously, without asking you to identify at all patients, but can you say what you think is the most common one? Is it addiction to drink or drugs or gambling? Or is it a trigger like losing job or husband and wife?
I understand many of those things. So let's start with, addiction to substances or gambling, etc. I very much, from the lens through which I work, understand that as a way of coping. And so there are parts of ourselves. Everyone has got different parts, and there are parts of ourselves who, somewhere along the line, might have learned that this is an alternative way for me to cope. There are other parts of ourselves that have more healthy or more adaptive ways of coping, but sometimes those parts of ourselves need a little bit of growing and an opportunity to develop. What we would hope for in a healthy individual is that that's modeled throughout the childhood years, and that we see this kind of healthy adult behavior model to someone. And when that's lacking, or if the environment is one of that's lacking in emotional support, or there's been abandonment, then often we see these kind of behaviors as a means to cope.
One of our interviews was with a big TV star in Australia, which people can see if they'd like to. And Mark, the man, said that interestingly, his problems, although he had a fantastic job and held it down, his problems were alcohol, drugs, and gambling. But during the course of the interview, he talked about how he'd put his first bet on at 14. His dad had always been a big gambler, and his mother an alcoholic. Now, I know your profession doesn't all agree about the genetic links. So what's your feeling? You've just hinted at it, you've just talked about it. Is it partly genetic when we get like that, when we are addicted?
And this is a long-standing debate. And I think that the consensus is that at the moment is that it's not either or, but that all of these things play a role. And so there's fairly good research that shows that there are genetic factors that could play a role in addiction. But from a behavioral point of view, and let me not speak specifically about this individual's life who I don't have enough context of, but um, it would be acceptable to have the hypothesis that this behavior became the coping mechanism of choice, because that's what I've seen other people do. And so when mom or when dad was angry or upset, they would reach for a bottle or a particular um, substance or a particular behavior. And so I learned when I'm growing up that when I'm not okay in the world, the easy way for me to feel better is to do that.
And of course, some of our viewers listening to this, watching this, will possibly be on the sofa with a bottle, and they'll be getting hell from the rest of their family because they can't see how they can possibly move forward. And sadly, they can't afford you or your profession. So I think that we ought to talk about people, that kind of stuckness. What can they do?
Yeah, I mean, as you're speaking, I've got the idea of this classic kind of family and friends intervention in mind. And I think anyone that's been part of that intervention will often know that they are not easy, that they are generally not received well, and that it may take many, many interventions of the sort in order to have the desired effect. And I think at a bigger sense, this speaks to a strength or a resource that people that have these kind of family or support network who are willing to make such an intervention at the risk of uh, great conflict, probably. These are people that care about you, that care about your well-being and want better for you. At the end of the day, I think those interventions are only successful when you want to get better as much as other people want you to get better. And in that sense, that time when it might be successful is really when you are ready to take that step. And so there's
Yes,
a
and do
lot
you
of
think?
responsibility on the individual themselves.
Yes, and sadly, some members of of the family who might do the intervention. I know you're going to talk about the tiers of intervention in a minute, but they themselves may have a problem with something, drugs, drink, or whatever it is. In other words, the person on the sofa doesn't have any respect for them and probably wouldn't want to listen. It's quite difficult, I think, to get the intervention done by people that you trust or listen to. And I must say, our Australian friend did have a lot of. He really believed in the people who were conducting the intervention. They were good friends, some family members, and it really was a moment when he thought, yeah, I think he'd already started to see it, but it was a moment when it came to him for sure that he had to get out of this trouble, stuckness.
Yeah.
So it is
Yeah,
difficult,
absolutely.
isn't it? And to find people who you trust. Tell us about you mentioned the tiers of intervention. What did you mean by that?
Yeah. When we think about tiers of intervention, I'm thinking specifically about um, what help is available to me or what resources are available to me. Um, and so I have a metaphor that I like to think about where these different resources or professions fit um, into this space. And by no means, well, I want to make it clear that this is not a sort of hierarchy of intervention, but there are different parts, and each part has their, or each player has their part to play. And so, as a metaphor, I'll speak maybe about a hockey player. And if we think about a hockey player, the hockey player is part of a team, and there might be a coach. And if there are enough resources, there might be a personal trainer. And if this individual is serious about their hockey, they might do a little bit of extra work at home or on the gym to improve their balance or to get stronger or to get faster or to get fitter. Um, and so this individual might be playing a match and they get an injury to their ankle. They roll their ankle. And that might need a little bit more intervention. They might need to see a physiotherapist. They might need to take some time off, 2 or 3 weeks. They might need to be sent for x-rays. Or in the case of a really big trauma, they might need to go to an orthopedic surgeon who might need to do some surgical intervention. And so if we take that metaphor and apply it to tiers of intervention for mental health, we can think about prevention and maintenance factors, and then also kind of more acute intervention. And so if I think about the coach and the personal trainer, I'm thinking about um, life coaches, lay counselors, community leaders, religious leaders. If I think about the team, I'm thinking about friends, family, our broader community. And for most people, that is where they will be getting most of their support. Um, some people might also be doing a lot of their own learning, whether that be reading, watching videos, doing courses, working on themselves in order to understand themselves better. and to build resilience. And then we'll have those individuals who twist their ankle or roll their ankle, as it were, and they might need a bit more focused attention. And that's where we start looking at kind of more tertiary care, or maybe with a psychologist or with a psychiatrist, where there's more specific intervention focused at kind of healing this injury.
Right. And I think our English viewers will, at that point, give out a hollow laugh because they can barely see their GP, let alone see a psychologist. It's about money, actually. This is all about money. And so you have a lot of people waiting for some sort of intervention from a professional like yourself. And there isn't going to be one. I wonder if we could just look at, would you say the kind of patients who have this kind of stuckness, are they more young or old or middle age, or you can't pinpoint it?
Yeah, it can happen at any age. Yeah, I've got a lot of thoughts, but it can happen at any age. And I'm thinking about meaning. Um, there are certain times in one's life when there's maybe more likely or more common to experience a kind of existential crisis. I'm thinking about the so-called midlife crisis, or more recently, there's now something like a quarter-life crisis. But these are times in my life where uh, people often have this realization of, like, is this what life is all about? Like, is this it for me? I'm so old and I haven't achieved anything, or I've worked so hard and I'm not getting anywhere. And so there are periods, or stages of development, I think, where we battle with different conflicts. And at some point, that conflict might be about death. At a different point, that conflict might be about making a mark on the world, or being successful, or having a family. At earlier ages, it might be about identity and finding out who I am.
It is interesting, I think. I looked at the figures for the UK and the US in particular. Since the COVID outbreak, since people were locked up, many have not gone back to work or even started work. And there's something like in the UK, 1 million young people who, of course, are getting benefits. They're not in further education, ordinary education, or work. And there they sit on the sofa because they're on benefits. And they're likely to go on sitting there because they've not really discovered their self or what they're capable of.
Yeah. I think it was Freud who said, humans were made for two things, and to love and to work. And so as much as work provides us with material means, a way to survive in the world and have buy food and shelter and kind of take care of our physiological needs, having employment or having work is one of the most dignifying things we can do for someone, because now this is a place for me to experiment in the world. It's a place for me to do something that matters. And of course, there are many jobs where people feel what I'm doing doesn't matter. But regardless of what you're doing, we can take a view on it that I'm contributing to something greater than myself. If I think in South Africa, we're sitting with a huge youth unemployment problem of something in the 70%. And the problem there is that not necessarily that these youth will turn into adults who will need to be supported by the state, but that this is more than likely a generation of hopeless people, undignified and with no purpose. And if I think back to the hockey player, oftentimes these are people who are not working together as a team. And anyone who's played a team sport knows what a great feeling it is to be part of a team and to
Yes.
contribute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those Yes, and many of those people, the money's coming in, but they've never known that feeling. Interestingly, we had a chat with a lovely lady, Anne, who could talk about the elderly and how the loss of purpose was a real problem. And she felt, and I think this applies to all ages, volunteering can really help. It can be a stepping stone sometimes for younger people to something else. And for the elderly, if it's the right thing for you, it can help enormously with your self-esteem.
Yeah, I agree. Volunteering at any level, regardless of where it is, ideally it would be in, people are drawn to things that they have a passion for, that they have a particular interest. That might be animals, that might be children, that might be impoverished people, etc. Contributing in that space, whether it be with time or financially, is one of the most beneficial things we can do for ourselves, for the simple reason that now life is more than just about me. And so if I take myself off the couch where it's just me and Netflix, as it were, and I go look outside, I might be in need. But if I open my eyes to the world around me, I will very likely see a neighbor who might be in need. And then life is more than just about me and my needs.
I quite agree. And the hardest thing when you're depressed is to actually think that way and feel that way about other people, because you become very self-centered when you're depressed and so on. But the idea of being able to see someone else's troubles is huge, really. Um, can I just talk about your belief in physical activity and its management of people with mental health problems? But I know you trained in it. I'm not sure I can say the word biokineticist.
Biokineticist, yes. So that's a profession we have in South Africa that is something akin to an exercise physiologist or a physical therapist. Really, we're using exercise as, or prescribing exercise to treat chronic and acute conditions. Yeah.
And there seems to be more and more evidence across the world that if someone can get off the sofa and take some small steps, which might lead to a bit of a run or whatever, it can make a difference to the brain.
Yeah, and if we talk about exercise, maybe we zoom out a little bit and talk about physical activity. Many people are intimidated by the idea of exercise. If you think about physical activity being an umbrella term, kind of including all movement, all physical movement, when I'm moving my muscles and my skeleton, exercise would be a specific subset of physical activity, with exercise being a bit more purposeful. This is me going to the gym or going for a run or playing a sport, um, or doing a workout at home. Um, and there are great benefits to exercise. Of course, there are the physiological and the cardiovascular benefits that we know are very well proven. But we don't necessarily always need to do the structured exercise. There are a lot of benefits that we can get from just physical activity. And that includes walking around the block, washing your car, doing some gardening, taking the stairs, um, and building up our investment of physical activity or movement throughout the day. About 2 years ago, there was a meta-analysis, in other words, a aggregation of a lot of other research or systematic reviews, um, that was published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine. And the question was really looking at physical activity as a therapeutic intervention versus pharmacotherapy or medication and psychotherapy. And the results are really promising. If you put them against each other one-on-one, physical activity as an intervention was shown to be uh, as effective as pharmacotherapy or psychotherapy. Um, and the takeaway there for me is this is an intervention that is accessible to you at low cost, with low barriers, and that have an enormous additional amount of other benefits over and above those associated with exercise. The problem is always adherence, and people just don't know where to start. And to that, I would say, something is better than nothing. Not to let great be the enemy of good. Just because I can't run 5 kilometers at the moment, that doesn't mean you shouldn't try walk 500 meters. And then there's a great saying that I often used as a biokineticist, but I found myself continuing to use it as a psychologist, is that motion is lotion. And, at the start for you, sitting on that couch, might just be to get up off the couch and go walk around in the garden, in the road, walk up the stairs, and just move your body and realize what it feels like to be in your body and move your muscles.
And we don't undermine the fact that that's a huge, huge step for some people, just getting off the sofa. But I want to ask you, really, because you're in a position to tell us, because you've seen people who've done it. If someone's been stuck, as I'm going to go on calling it, for months or even years, what is the first, tiniest sort of shift you recommend to loosen the grip of that stuckness? Something they could try for them and that's going to be manageable.
Yeah. I'm going to answer that in 2 tiers. I'm going to go back to physical activity, and I'm going to say, let's take charge of the health basics. And that is, are you moving? What are you eating? And are you sleeping? But before we do anything else, let's try and make the smallest change possible across those 3 areas. And when I say diet, I'm not advocating for a specific Banting or Atkins or low carb. Like, we all know what a healthy diet means to us, and maybe there might be a bit more education there. But eating whole foods, eating vegetables and fruits, and not eating junk, and moving, and then sleep. A lot of people, especially struggling with depression and anxiety, either have an increase amount of sleep, or a decrease amount of sleep, particularly with anxiety. And so one of the things we can do is start to defend the quality of our sleep. And that might be as simple as saying, do you know what, I'm not going to watch TV in bed. Bed is for sleeping. I'm not going to be on my laptop. I'm not going to be on my phone. Or I'm going to buy a new set of sheets. Or I'm going to make my bedroom a pleasant place to be. Or I'm going to go to bed at 11 o'clock, whatever it is. So really looking after those 3 things: exercise, diet, and sleep. And then the second part of my response would be, in terms of a first step to get going, is to think about what is in my control. And you've spoken about unemployment and people who might have been retrenched or lost their jobs for whatever reason, and reasons that are often outside of their control, who might feel like now they have no control over their lives. I would encourage that person to think about, what are the areas here that are actually in my control? And as a second step, what can they do about it? And if they can do something about it right now. And if they can do something about it right now, make a plan and then execute, and start with the small steps. And for someone sitting on the couch, that might be something I can control right now, is what I put in my mouth, is whether I exercise or not, what time I go to bed, what I spend my time doing, etc.
Right. Well, I think we ought to just touch on therapy. I'm always very worried about therapy because it costs people money. But I think we ought to look at what it can do for anybody who can get together some money from wherever the source is. But what does counselling psychology do for someone that's stuck? Is it a game changer, or is it just a gradual process, and does it take a long time?
Again, I think we'll speak in general terms. For me personally, so we'll speak in general terms and for me personally, let me not speak for all therapists. For me, I think therapy is, or the most salient or effective feature in therapy is the relationship. And so for many people, they might have never experienced um, being in a stable relationship with someone who cares about them and who are willing to walk a journey with them. And being a therapist sometimes is taking one foot and putting it there with that person in the stuckness, but keeping another foot on the riverbank, and then being willing to kind of show that person an alternative way. But it's very much a team sport, and this is not a one-man show where people can think they'll arrive in therapy and be told what to do or be given 10 steps. This is
Yeah.
an alliance and a relationship.
I think people underestimate the importance of that relationship between therapist and the person who's having difficulties, and the help it can give to move people a bit forward, and know that somebody, though you have to pay them, does care and will go the distance with you. That's wonderful. But of course, that's about money. I'm wondering, what's your personal view about, should therapists worldwide do more for nothing to just help people? Or, I know that's controversial as well.
Yeah, I think if we're realistic about it, we could ask the same thing about doctors or lawyers or any other sort of profession. Again, it comes down to an individual view of the therapist, and many therapists have clients that they would take on pro rata or at a special rate, or maybe run groups that are free as part of their as part of their offering. But unfortunately, the reality is that most therapists or becoming a psychologist takes many years of study at great cost, and running a practice has an expense. And so yeah, I would challenge the idea that the burden of societal mental health should fall at the feet of therapists who are generally spending the rest of their time working one-on-one. But on that, you raise an important point, which is actually almost an economics problem, because in most countries there's a huge shortage of psychologists and mental health care workers in large, because of the intense nature of training. And so for therapists who spend their time working with one patient at a time, 1 hour at a time, is actually an incredibly poor use of resources. Now, of course, for that one individual who makes it to the room, it's a very good use of resources, but at a societal level, it's not very effective. And so in poorly resourced settings, we really need to move away from this individual model of therapy and come back to this idea of the hockey team. And an alternative there would be for the mental health care worker, whether they now be a psychologist or whatever, to start partnering with community leaders, with religious leaders, in order to support people on the ground who are actually doing most of that work in any event.
Yeah.
And so that we work in communities across the board, where communities know what they need, they know what the problems are, and not only working one patient at a time. And so that's very much the view I have in terms of a high impact use of my time at a, can we say, for an altruistic cause, or at a low cost cause, is who are the people that I can support to support other people.
Yeah. No, well, I just wanted to finish just talking about something that is so important, I believe, and that is children. Because in the UK, I'm going to take the UK because it sticks out in my mind, there is really not the money to help children who have difficulties at quite a young age. There's long, long waiting lists. And the people are well intentioned who'd like to help them, but there just aren't enough of them, as you say. So you have quite young people developing anorexia or all sorts of behavioural difficulties, but there's often nobody there. So back they go to their screens. And I wonder what's going to happen to society unless there is more intervention for our children.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, you speak about screens. There's an irony there, because for this generation, in all likelihood, their help is going to come from the screen. And my view is that the screen is a big part of the cause, and not the screen itself, but the screen as a delivery vehicle for distraction, where we are just inundated with an enormous amount of information, and don't know what to do with all of that information. And some of that information might cause us to become anxious. A lot of that information, especially on social media, might cause us to feel bad about ourselves. Um, and trying to take a step away from all of that intense information, I think for children is incredibly important. And then the flip side is, of course, with artificial intelligence exploding at the moment, we will see more and more um, AI bots or chatbot therapists being deployed as vehicles to kind of help lighten this burden.
Of interest, and we must then finish. There are a great many chances to get online and have a therapist, as you say, through AI or whatever. Should people believe they can really help them?
Hmm. I mean, there are a lot of this is an ethical dilemma, right? There are a lot of considerations. I think this is a space to keep an eye on. Um, I think that there is a lot of promising technology that could be delivered um, in certain environments with a fair degree of success, but there will always need to be safeguards in place. And those safeguards should be in place to protect that player who have rolled their ankle. And so I think there's incredible utility for AI as a tool to help the hockey team be fitter, stronger, better, or as an assessment tool to say, hey, hang on, actually, you're not fit to play on this team, or I think you should take a week or two off, whatever it is. So as a screening tool, as an assessment tool, I think at the moment it's fair, but at a more severe level of intervention, I don't think we're there yet, but I do think we will see that space continuing to evolve. Um,
Well, there are a lot of people for that's probably all they can manage because I know we keep touching on money, but it's a real consideration. People can't afford the help that they deserve very often, or there aren't enough people to deliver it worldwide.
and in those cases, you could very much take a view of harm reduction and say, well, then again, yeah, something is better than nothing. And for a lot of people, talking to a chatbot might well be a better option than having nothing.
I think that's probably true. I'm really very grateful for your time, and we must let you go back to patients now. But and I know how challenging your work must be, but it does also, I'm sure, give you hope sometimes, and give the people watching this hope, because that's very important, I think, when you feel stuck. So, Willem, thank you so much for being with me.
Thanks for having me, Chrissie. And I think it's wonderful that you're having these conversations and making these available for people, and in your own way contributing to someone maybe making that step towards becoming unstuck.
Lovely. Thank you so much.